everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and I would start with, given that I think that, well, you heard Christoph Schomer, who is also from the computer science department, but I'm the only one who is present here and give a talk from that department. So I would like to also tell you that what exactly you can expect from us, I would say. So within the computer science department, there is a group called Individual and Collective Reasoning, called ICR, and all of us, the three computer scientists that you might see and identify here, we are coming from this group. So this is not a machine learning group, not a neural network group. This is all about logic and reasoning. We are a very interdisciplinary group. We at least like to think so, but I will show some background in order to make you believe me. This group, though, is within the AI lab, so we do AI research with those people, well, next to those people who do the classical machine learning type of AI research, but as I said, we are engaged with the so-called symbolic type of AI and not the sub-symbolic one. I would like to introduce my colleagues who might have not introduced themselves yet because they did not have the chance. So Amro Najar is one of my colleagues here. You could hear them asking, and also Daniel Karpati. And well, I have to tell also that if you want to consider Amro as our colleague, then you can do it today and tomorrow, because from Monday he will be the colleague of the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology, unfortunately. From Tuesday? Okay, then Monday is your chance then. Okay, yes. Okay. I work also in this group, and I am responsible for all the AI and law research within the ICR group, and we have plenty of research projects, so I'm very happy to be so. And I have also the honor to represent Luxembourg in the Benelux Association for AI. And just to identify that why, or make you understand that why I'm talking about what I am talking about, is that I would like to tell what Isabel started to tell about my interdisciplinary background. Actually, the explanation for that, I would say that it's pretty straightforward, but some people say that it's very unusual, is that I wanted to study logic and reasoning, but when I was a child, I understood from the American movies that lawyers do that because, you know, they explain many things and argue very harshly in the courtroom. So I went to the law school, and then I realized that this is not exactly what I was looking for. But anyway, I worked as a lawyer for a while, and then studied also communication, and then I found the logic and theory of science master, and I did my PhD in logic. So, as Isabel also told you, my area is computational legal theory and applied logics for AI, which means that I use mathematical structures and languages, or I create them in order to represent the legal concepts and legal structures, the legal norms, and make them understandable for the computer, for the artificial intelligence, whatever we mean by that. I also mentioned that before I engaged with academia, I worked as a lawyer for a while. I was leading a national advocacy organization in Hungary, and my job was to balance between regulation and the industry's self-regulation, so how the applied ethics part can take over from the central regulation part. That's why I'm very interested also in that part of the AI and ethics, that how it will turn out. But my core area now is really about how to do that at all, how we can put legal norms or any kind of norms, ethical norms, into the computer. What does that mean? How this should look like? Okay. I guess you know or you agree that there is no definition of artificial intelligence as such, so everyone can tell about their ideas and use his or her own definition. If I think about artificial intelligence, I would think about something mimicking or reproducing or producing whatever takes some kind of intelligence from us people or humans and do it with the computer. But I think that we should focus a little bit on that, how broad the intelligence actually is. Because if we think that how to gather what artificial intelligence should be, then I'm pretty sure that many people, or almost all the people, would think about what Christine has talked and what is the basis of machine learning and neural networks, that we would like to find out what happens in the brain. We would like to model that and then use that model in the computer and then somehow reproduce those processes in order to produce intelligence and mimicking whatever can be done with this intelligence. I guess you recognize that this is everyone's favorite pavilion, the Russian one, so I used it with the picture of that. I think, though, that artificial intelligence, intelligence is a much broader thing than what we can look for in the source, in the brain, because I also think that we can ask about intelligence looking at what is produced with intelligence. I think that intelligence is witnessed in so many things in our world that it is a very nice starting point to trying to figure out that what happens in the brain, but it is so complex that I think it's a very long way to go to understand that how these things and connections in the brain, and if we mimic them, how these will lead us to some producement of intelligent things. I think, though, that we can do also at the same time from the other direction and investigate that how these outputs of intelligence, these that are displaying intelligence, look like. And if we understand that how these are structured, what these things mean, then we can also have some very nice images about how artificial intelligence should look like and work and contain and concern and reflect on. And I don't know whether you identify, but I do believe that many of these things actually falls into your research area. So I would like to emphasize that when you feel like that AI is something which is done by them, I think that the AI is something that which should be done by all of us, because otherwise AI will be some very strange and partial thing. Hopefully, in a very, very far future, AI will be able to tell us something, I would say, about these things. Today, I will show you something, what kind of structures we build in law and how those can be used in AI. So what I would like to emphasize before I start my substantial part here is that while the output is technological, and therefore we tend to identify AI as a technological discipline, I believe that it's way more interdisciplinary. I will use another word for that. And we shouldn't think that even if now, when we say that AI communities, we mostly refer to people with computer science background sitting down and coding, I think that it's all of our job. So I would say that it's very usual to think about artificial intelligence as the biggest challenge of humanity. Yeah, I'm not completely sure about this picture. Yeah, daunting or threatening things can be said about what might happen at the day, but also if you ask people working with neural networks, they might say that it's not so close as it feels sometimes, so some of the outputs are rather banal at this point, so maybe the end is not so close as we think. So instead of using this kind of threatening, also very intriguing picture of biggest challenge of the humanity in which we are all together, I like to also think about AI as a new discipline. But when I think about AI as a new discipline, I also feel that many people, or lawyers, for example, but I think that many of you might also think that if it's a new discipline, that it's rather invasive and taking our job away and taking our disciplines away. So I would say rather that a new omnidisciplinary research area, and then I really hope that it expresses how inclusive I think AI is. Okay, let me mention it here briefly that this is why I think that such a conference is so important, because we just discussed with Johannes in the lunch break whether it makes sense to have such a broad range of different expertise and different concepts and methodologies, and with the danger that we might don't even understand each other as it is supposed to be. But I believe it is very useful, and I really wish that more of our computer science colleagues could be here today and listen to these talks. So I really hope that there will be some continuation and we can participate. So thanks a lot for organizing such a conference. I personally learn a lot, and I'm very happy to have this kind of interaction and not just, sitting with computer scientists. Okay, so if I think about not me, maybe I'm not a good example, but if people think about that, what can AI take from law, I'm pretty sure that the first reaction is that their jobs. So it feels like also Jean mentioned that bailiffs have a pretty big problem because their job is not needed anymore, because what they have done or what they did in the past can be done by artificial intelligence or whatever technological solution. But I think that there is another aspect, that what AI can learn from law. Because as I said, I think that law, for example, and I also believe it's all, true for your disciplines, have some very complex structure which has evolved, developed through evolution for thousands of years, and have some very complex structures and solutions that can be learned and that can be used in AI not only for AI and classical AI and law solutions, but in other areas. And I would like to show you today something about that. So let me switch to machine ethics. I don't know what you might mean by this label. I will tell you what I understand by this label. So within the so-called current AI communities, what is considered as machine ethics is a sub-discipline within AI concerned with somehow that how machines will treat people, how ethically they will behave with humans or with other machines. We can question whether this makes sense at all. And it has two, legs, as you can see. On one hand, which is rather the classical ethical question that what does it mean at all, that a machine is moral, what kind of moral norms we should consider, if any at all, or what kind of ethical codes we should create, if any at all, in order to talk about something as a moral machine. And the other hand, it's a technological question, or it's a computational theoretical question of how to automate moral reasoning, or I would say also legal reasoning, but if we decided about the norms or the values that we would like to implement, and how to make it the case that it does happen. And this is a picture showing that, this is how advanced this situation is, that we understand that something like this should happen, that the moral reasoning algorithm, whatever that will be, or whatever that is, take into account that what is the context, what are the options, what is the ability of the machine, and takes also into account that what kind of moral values or moral norms it should obey, and then calculate what it needs to calculate, and then makes its moral choices. A moral choice will mean that it takes the action according to some of those moral rules or values that it put as an input. In order to do so, it seems to be a very obvious first task that our ethics or our moral rules should be formalized. I'm very enthusiastic about this because this is what I do. So my area is the so-called deontic logic and normative systems, which is the logic which is supposed to handle concepts like obligation, permission, and prohibition, and rights, and duties, and what these mean in a mathematical term, and how we can recreate in a mathematical language what the norms are. So far so good. And it seems to be, not an easy task, but an absolutely graspable task. However, what doesn't seem to be so trivial, maybe surprisingly, that it's very far from clear that what humanity means by our moral rules. Because, of course, we like to say so, and it seems to be a complete agreement when we think about machines that if there will be one day such a thing, that autonomous intelligent system, that it is only permissible if it obeys our moral rules. Good, but what those are exactly? I'm pretty sure that everyone is familiar with this picture and many of these pictures, so I would like to only mention that, of course, it was a very interesting showcase to display that how different our moral considerations are. So this is the so-called moral machine experiment executed by the MIT, in which people were asked about that who should be hit by the car if it is unavoidable that it hits someone. And there were different options to choose from. Actually, there are a lot of critics about this experiment, but it showed very well that, yes, our convictions and our intuitions, even in an unnatural situation, because, of course, someone is sitting in the computer and tries different options. But anyway, these are rather different. 40 million answers, though, tell a lot about that, the diversity of values and norms. And I just checked, because I'm originally from Budapest, I checked how similar Luxembourg and Hungary is in order to see whether it was a good decision for me to move to Luxembourg. And I have to tell that the older I get, it seems to be a better and better decision, because in Luxembourg, they tend to spare the older person, not the younger one. So I'm rather safe as I'm getting older in Luxembourg. That's a good thing. Okay, so we might think that, of course, people are not reflective enough about how probably they are not even consistent regarding their own moral considerations and values. So how could we expect that there will be something after such an experiment as a globally valid set of norms. We shouldn't expect that, but there are professionals. There are people, there are ethicists, there are applied ethicists who have this job to identify that, what are the shared values and norms. So this paper which investigated 48 AI and ethics or ethical code of AI kind of guidelines. And after investigating them, they're finding that while some emerging values could be identified, they are rather vague. And the problem is that no single ethical principle appeared to be common in the entire corpus. So it seems that neither the professional can solve this problem of identifying our moral norms and such. But of course, this seems to be an issue how to make ethical AI at all. So if he had decided, then what it will mean if we cannot identify the norms themselves. One might say that the idea of thinking in global terms doesn't make sense because there won't be a global, well, at least we hope that won't be a global artificial intelligence, but there will be locally operating AI tools. So if we consider these moral norms and values that should be shared in order to have such a thing as an ethical AI, we should focus on a locally operating thing and identify that, in that case, whose moral rules should be implemented in the machine. We might say that, well, whoever is affected, of course, but the problem is, I think this is a very natural answer, and actually there is no other natural answer which offers itself, but the problem is that there are always multiple stakeholders. I read many papers about that, so it's not really working to say that no problem, because we just have to identify the stakeholders. Because even if we think that, yeah, there are differences between countries, but within a nation we tend to think the same, well, obviously this is not true, but even if we tend to think about what should be done and what is right and wrong, in a specific case, the very similar normative systems can end up in a very clear disagreement, so it doesn't really help. But then what? So it seems to be an issue that, okay, then the game is over, because it seems that this kind of thing which is referred to as the moral disagreement is a very clear and painful barrier for the whole idea of making AI, whatever it will be, moral or ethical. And then, okay, before we give up our profession, I would say that there is a solution. What I would like to show here is that I showed this picture before with the box on the right, and nowadays if someone talks about this issue, emphasizes that actually first some kind of conflict resolution, but maybe this is not the best word, but somehow we should manage this, otherwise we have no proper input to the whole moral reasoning algorithm. Okay, question still, how to do that? How to decide whose moral rules should be obeyed by an intelligent autonomous system? Luckily, it seems to be an unprecedented issue, but it is not. So many normative concepts and concerns have been addressed and have been handled properly in law. And this is what I would like to show you today. Okay. So to show you a case, many computers and many people now. There is a big party there. So I would like to tell you a story. This is a true story, actually, and as you can see, I'm very good with using PowerPoint and drawing and everything. So there was this guy in Hungary, in the Hungarian countryside, called Sándor. Sándor wasn't happy in the Hungarian countryside, unfortunately, so at the day, he decided to move to France. And he left his house behind. In France, that was the idea that he would have a better life in France, and he did have a better life because he found love. Oh, no problem. Will you come again? Maybe. Actually, I give a very good talk, so maybe you can join. Okay. Okay. So Sándor did find a better life in France. So he fell in love. He found a girlfriend. They moved in together. So everything was beautiful. Actually, he felt so good in France and accommodated himself so much to the French environment, then at the day he chose the French citizenship over the Hungarian one. Unfortunately, as all the good things, Sándor's life came to its end one day, and this is where the legal dispute, the legal issue starts. Because Sándor had siblings in Hungary, and they became rather, well, they were very sad, of course, but they became rather interested in what happens to the house. So they went to the local public notary and asked that who inherits the house. And usually, this is the question that the public notary has to answer, taking the civil code of Hungary in this case, and simply, identifying the situation and tell that this is the siblings, maybe the French girlfriend or whoever. But in this situation, before answering this question, there is a question in advance she needs to answer, the public notary has to answer, and this one is that should it be decided, who inherits the house, should it be decided according to the Hungarian law or according to the French law? This is the situation that we are facing here. This situation is called the so-called conflict of laws, because there are two, at least, sometimes it's more, but at least two normative systems, two legal systems, according to which a given legal dispute could be decided. There are reasons to feel that it is fair to be decided a case, to have decided a case according to one or according to the other, and it is an open, well, it's not an open question anymore, but it was an open question for a while, how to decide that. Okay, so this is called conflict of laws, this situation, and this branch of law, this is a branch of law area within law, within private international law. It concerns relations across different jurisdictions between natural persons. The point is that in these situations, the common point is that there is a foreign element, foreign compared to the situation or the place where the whole legal process has been started, because of the different nationalities of the involved people, because of the place of the signing the contract, because of the house being in Hungary and having French citizenship of the testator. What I would like to emphasize here is that when the public notary thinks about how to do this job, she doesn't have the option to go around. So she doesn't decide this case based on how she feels. If she ends up applying the French law, she does so because the Hungarian law tells her to do that. Okay, so this is important. This is not up to her how she feels. The Hungarian law contains rules telling that in this case, which law should be applied. Okay, why do we have such background situations? Why do we have such situations? Because there is an international circulation of goods and people more and more. So this won't stop. This issue won't disappear. And this is very important. There is a mutual acknowledgement in international relations, even if people don't necessarily think so, but the official situation is that the legal systems are considered mutually equal. So we don't say that, well, obviously the US rules will be applied or whatever. No such thing exists in the diplomacy situation of this, and this is very important. And since there are differences in the legal systems, it does have a stake which law is applied in such a situation. That's why we call it a conflict of laws. It might be theoretically the case that it wouldn't be different, but the outcome will be still. First, the decision has to be made which law will be applied. Okay, this is not the only type of conflict in law, so we might say that, oh, come on, we have conflict resolution principles in law, so why not to apply them? If you think about Roman law, I don't know how often you think about Roman law, sometimes I do, because I had to have a very serious exam on my birthday. Anyway, so in Roman law, people had these principles using some kind of intrinsic properties of rules based on which they could decide that, of course, the higher law overrules the lower law, the newer one overrules the older one, and if we have a more specific one than the other, then the more specific should be applied and not the more general one. These are very nice ideas, of course, and they are working, I would say, that all the currently existing legal systems. So if a judge or if someone, a public notary, feels or faces such a situation, she will use this kind of principles. It's very much embedded in our legal thinking or the didactics that we use. So these priority standards work because they resolve the conflicts between the given statutes according to some feature of these statutes. Okay, but these features are bound to the fact that the statutes are within the same legal system. Okay, using these priority standards, these create a so-called partial order. This is a mathematical expression within the one national legal system, so it's very fine, and it resolves many cases. But in conflict of law, this won't work because we are not within one normative system. We have the situation that we have two normative systems at least, sometimes it's really more, and then we don't have the good basis to use some kind of properties of the features based on which we could have this. And as I said, that's the crucial point here, the mutual acknowledgement, the legal systems being equal. Okay? So what these conflict of laws as a branch of law does is that it indirectly settles the case, telling that which legal system has to be applied in such a situation. It is called collision rules, given that we have some collision here and we have to resolve. Okay, these international collision rules are special because while the substantial legal rules have also a condition and an operative part, that if this is the case, then this is what should be done. This is the same in a collision rule too, but it doesn't take, this is the situation, it takes that if this is the type of the situation that we are facing, if this is the domain that we are talking about, then, this is the law that you should have, you should apply, okay? So it is a different type of norms, which is, for example, the mathematical point of view is a very relevant issue, because of course, once she gets the answer which law to apply, then we still need to be able to handle the rules within that law themselves. Okay, so as I said, this is what they do. They assign the legal system that is to be applied in a given group of statement of facts. So if we identify these, I show you, I think it's easier. So in the case of Sándor, the public notary took this book of conflict of laws, which is she had because she had all the law books, let's say, and she found this rule. The legal relationship of inheritance shall be adjudged on the basis of the law, which was the personal law of the testator at the time of his death. I hope it's very visible that it doesn't mention any nationality, it doesn't mention anything specific, it does somehow give a context-dependent solution. This is an inheritance case, and in that case, we obviously will have a testator, otherwise it wouldn't be an inheritance case, and the testator had the personal law mostly means the citizenship. So we, as Hungarian legislators, we think that the most connected legal system to such a situation will be that which was the personal law of the testator when he died. Okay? So this is this was the idea of Savigny in the 19th century, saying that there is a local seat in each case. One of the connections to these normative systems will be stronger than the other. And Savigny hoped that actually all the nations will agree on that, so the conflict of laws regulation will be the same in every country. It didn't perfectly happen, so it is not the case that the conflict of laws rules are the same in every country, but they are much, much more similar than the substantial rules themselves. So there is some correspondence and correlation, and it works very nicely because we don't have unresolved international situations. Don't mind the formulas. The point is just to show that this assignment happens based on thinking about the factors of a case, because these factors can be the parties, can be, in this case, can be the place of the house. Maybe it's a factor that, that he had a French wife. So there are some factors which should be considered in a statement of facts. This is what the judge does, so it's not something that I invented because I wanted to use my formulas. This is what happens in law. We just, or I just use these formulas. And actually, it provides a partial order based on the set of factors, and this is how it identifies which rule should be applied. We said that this is what she found, and public notary she found, so we think we are done, because what was the citizenship of Sándor, do you remember, when he died? French, indeed. He was a happy Frenchman, not a Hungarian anymore. So the public notary now puts the Hungarian conflict of laws book back on the shelf and takes the French law book. Well, of course, no such thing. But anyway, she takes the French law book. Unfortunately, in the French law, or luckily, or I don't know, in the French law, it still counts as an international situation. So in order to see what should happen, first, she needs to check the conflict of laws rules in the French law, because they also have such a thing. And what she found was the very similar rules saying that if it's an inheritance case, that the personal law should be applied, except if there is real estate in the heritage, because in that case, the law of the place of the real estate, which should be the one that is applied. So in that case, what happens is that she closes the French book and takes again the Hungarian one, but it's still an international situation. So I guess you identify that this would be a so-called infinite loop, which would be very, very tiring to our public notary. Luckily, they thought about this situation, and sorry, this is just the mathematical part. They thought about this situation, I mean the legislator, and there is a rule in the Hungarian conflict of laws rules saying that if, in accordance with this law decree, which was the type of this statute, foreign law is applicable, the rules of the applicable foreign law directly settling the issue in question shall govern, which means that when she opens the French book, given that that was said by the first one, the section of 36 gave us the French law, she takes the French law book, and then she doesn't have to check the French conflict of laws again. She can go what should happen with the house according to the French inheritance rule. However, actually, it's always easier to apply the on law of the notary. So, clever Hungarian legislator also put this rule into the beginning of this law decree. If, however, the foreign law refers back to the Hungarian law in the issue of concern, with regard to this rule, the Hungarian law shall be applicable. So, at this situation, Sándor case was judged according to the Hungarian law and not the French one. What I would like to emphasize, it's called renvoi, actually, when a case comes back to the jurisdiction of those who manages the legal process. What I would like to emphasize here that I think this is amazing, because the infinite loop is a problem, for example, in set theory, and what this rule does here is playing the role of the axiom of foundation. This is not written by mathematicians, still displays some mathematical structure which can be formalized. Good for me. So these are just definitions, don't worry about that. Why I'm talking about this? I'm talking about this because I hope you realize that there is a very strong parallel between the situation that is in the scope of conflict of laws, having mutual acknowledgement, having legal systems that could be applied, and we don't know how to decide which one should be. And in this machine ethics problem, where we have multiple stakeholders with different normative systems, and we have no idea how to manage this situation. And what I'm saying is that actually conflict of laws has a working solution for many years now. It's a well-evolved solution. Actually, have different tricks, for example, to avoid an infinite loop, which we can all learn. And if we abstract them, then we can implement into AI, and then, for example, this kind of problem of machine ethics can be resolved, or at least, let's say, because we should be modest here, so we can contribute to the solution of such a big problem in machine ethics to do so. But I would like to mention that actually it seems to be, well, of course, ethics and law are similar, well, not big news, well, indeed, but there is not the only situation in which such a methodology or such a know-how of conflict of laws could be used, because we have some very similar situation in the problem of interoperability blockchain problem in smart contracts. Thank you. When there is no overarching authority, so we have to solve somehow that what happens if there is a conflict. So I think that many places, well, a few places at least, in computing, this solution can be used if we learn what lawyers already created, and we can identify what is the mathematical structure which can be understood by the computer. What is important here, that the solution is not just, okay, we have a solution and it's better than nothing. I think it's a very good solution because the context already goes into the conflict resolution part. So what we have as applicable normative system will be the most fitting to the given context, which seems to be an important thing, because fitting the context is something which is often identified as a very crucial element in being autonomous and doing something which has to be done in the given situation. Thank you.